This presentation is on the National Museum of American Indians, Mannahatta to Manhattan, by Hannah Baig. Social Studies standards are for Grade 4, Native Americans in New York City. The themes are civilization, culture, cooperation, migration, conflict, and change. The subject is Social Studies. The Social Studies standards are 1.3 and 1.1. History of the United States and New York. The land, then and now. On the left is what Manhattan used to look like in the 1500s, and on the right is how Manhattan looks now. As you can see, the environment was totally different. The environment was natural. There was no buildings or skyscrapers. Mannahatta. This land was called Mannahatta, which meant hilly island. This island was filled with various varieties of fruits, nuts, and birds. Animals flourished in this beautiful natural environment. The animals had plenty of space for themselves. The Native Americans that inhabited Lower Manhattan were called the Lenape. The Lenape actually means the people in their language. Lenape clothing. The Lenape people used their environment to their full advantage. When the weather was nice, women and girls made and wore materials that came from plants, while men and boys wore loincloths made from deerskin. When it was cold outside, everyone wore animal skins and furs to keep warm. Lenape people mostly worked outdoors, but when the winter months came around, they stayed indoors and worked on fixing and making new clothing and tools. As you can see, these clothing are very detailed. The colors and patterns you see are actually handmade beadwork. Lenape homes. The Lenape people use natural resources from their environment to live day to day. The Lenape people used trees to build their homes. These homes were easy to extend and add space as their families grew. The homes were shaped like domes. The roofs were left with an opening. This opening let the smoke out when they cooked. When the weather would get bad, they would cover the roof with bark to prevent water or anything else from getting into their homes. Lenape trade. The Lenape people used the water surrounding Lower Manhattan as an important trade route. The Atlantic Ocean consists of salt water, while the Hudson River consists of fresh water. These two bodies of water meet together. Lenape people call the Hudson River Shitamuk, which means the river that flows both ways. Depending on the Atlantic Ocean's tides, the Hudson River alternates its flow, north to south or south to north. Lenape people made dugout canoes from large tree trunks. This was a long, difficult process, but at the end, the canoe could hold about 20 men. They used these canoes to travel by the riverbanks and trade with other native people. First encounter. 1500s was the first time the Lenape people encountered the Europeans. This encounter changed their lives forever. New ideas and customs were exchanged. The fur trade. Beaver fur was an important fashion in Europe during the late 1500s to the mid-1800s. Beavers were hunted in Europe until they were almost extinct. So the Europeans started importing from the Lenape people in Mannahatta. The Lenape traded furs with the Europeans for things they needed, like metal axes, glass beads, guns, wool, linen cloth, and other various items. The trading didn't end until beavers were almost extinct in Mannahatta. Helping hand. The Lenape people thought of the Europeans as their friends. The Lenape people helped the Europeans learn how to live on the land. They taught them how to use the natural resources productively. Once the European people were self-sufficient, they started taking over the Lenape land. From Mannahatta to Manhattan. The Dutch settled in Lower Mannahatta and renamed the land Manhattan. As the Dutch took over the land, the Lenape people started getting pushed out further and further. As a result, the Lenape people started losing more and more of their homes and their land. Back at school application. So compare and contrast the native Lenape people's lifestyles with your current lifestyles. For example, you can use how they made their clothes, homes, what work they did, how they traveled, and their trade and their environment as comparison to yours. These are the references that were used for this PowerPoint presentation.